are you doing? My name is Ryan Kelly, and I'm going to be hosting another episode of Know Your Bosses. Know Your Bosses, if you're not aware, is a show where I will review some of the most classic bosses to the lesser known ones. I'll rank them based on their difficulty, creativity, appearance, and fighting style. In the end, the boss will get a ranking from 1, avoid the fight, to 10, pursue the fight. So now that I've quickly gone over the rules, we can talk about the boss we'll be fighting today. Today I'm going to be discussing...
Oh no, it looks like one of the villains is broken free.
What's that? An evildoer on the loose?
Who is it?
Man Ray? The atomic flounder? The dirty bubble?
No, worse than that. He's your archenemy, Prawn.
Prawn!
Did someone call? Oh, I thought maybe I was looking at superheroes. But now I see it's just a couple of pieces of gnarled driftwood.
Location. Prawn can be found in the Murmur. In order to be able to fight Prawn, you have to push 4 buttons that are scattered throughout the Murmur. Now these buttons aren't hidden by any means, but you're gonna have to explore a majority of the Murmur in order to find them all. But if you don't feel like finding them all, then here's where you can find all the buttons. The first button can be found at the end of the computer area right here. The second button can be found by paying this clam 2,300 shiny objects, and then use the launch pad to get you right next to the second button. The third button can be found by completing Security Tunnel. And the final button can be found right here in the ballroom. After you've activated every button, you can push the main button in the computer area, which will lower the bridge, giving you access to the fight with Prawn. Now if you have some skills in speedrunning or feel especially confident, then you can perform a trick called Prawn Skip, which will give you access to the Prawn fight without pushing any of the buttons. This trick is actually one of the easiest ones to perform in the game, so if you're feeling confident and feel comfortable doing the trick, then I definitely would recommend trying it out. In order to do this trick, you'll need access to the mission, the Spinning Towers of Power. Then you'll need to get Patrick caught right here on the slide, then wait for around 4 or 5 seconds. Then after that, jump and land right here. After doing this, then move Patrick to the right and jump twice in order to hit the loading trigger for the fight with Prawn. Now, if you want a more thorough explanation on how to do this trick, then I'd recommend checking out Shift's video about the trick. Boss information. Prawn is probably the most interesting boss in Battle for Bikini Bottom. Not because of his appearance or gameplay, but because of his history within the world of Spongebob. Prawn is a villain that was purely created for this game. Now, I am aware that the robot versions of Sandy, Patrick, and Spongebob were created just for Battle for Bikini Bottom, but they are just robotic versions of all the playable characters. Prawn, however, came from nothing in the show, and is also the only non-robotic boss in the game besides the Flying Dutchman and King Jellyfish. Now, something that's really cool with Prawn is that he's made a few cameos since his introduction in Battle for Bikini Bottom. He made a quick cameo in the Truth or Square video game in the exact area where you fought him in Battle for Bikini Bottom. And if you approach Prawn, SpongeBob will mistakenly call him Man Ray or Dr. Shrimp. He also made a cameo in SpongeBob Freestyle Funnies 2018, but I couldn't find any information on his role in the comic. But something that I was able to find information on is his reason for being a rival to Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy. He did one of the evilest things I can think of. He put a red sock in with all of Mermaid Man's white clothes. And the final interesting thing about Prawn is that his fight is very similar to Dingle Dial from Crash Bandicoot 3 Warped. Both bosses are protected by some sort of shield that surround them, you have to wait for an opening to hit this boss, and they both take 3 hits of damage to be defeated. Now this could just be a coincidence, or Prawn could be inspired by Dingle Dial considering that Crash Bandicoot 3 came out in 1998, while Battle for Bikini Bottom came out in 2003. Strategy. Prawn's fight is actually pretty interesting because there are several different ways of fighting him. However, the other methods of fighting him aren't intended, but because I actually speedrun this game and I can explain each of the methods of beating him, I'll be going over all 3 different methods of beating Prawn. Before you fight Prawn, you should get 2 or 3 of the golden underwear located here, here, and here. Other than that, there really isn't any preparation needed for this fight. Now, I'm going to be going over the intended method of beating Prawn first, then I'll go over the 2 other speedrunning methods of beating him. The normal fight with Prawn has a few components that can be quite a bit of a pain. There are laser panels on the ground that you can't walk on when lit. Once you hit Prawn once, hammer robots will spawn in and will chase you around, which is when the fight gets significantly harder. And finally, Prawn only has one attack, which has him using his backpack to shoot sound waves at you. All you need to do to avoid this attack is to run away from it and or jump over it. The only way to damage him is when the panels on the floor start to shuffle around until they make an opening for you to use your cruise bubble. Once you have an opening, use the cruise bubble to hit him. Rinse and repeat 2 more times and you will have beaten Prawn. Now, this is good and all, but I'd rather beat Prawn without having to worry about taking damage. Fortunately, thanks to the speedrunning community for BFBB, you can get through the entire fight with Prawn without taking any damage. The best part about this method is that it's easier than the real method for fighting Prawn. All you need to do in order to not take damage is to follow this path right here. All you need to do to stay in the hitbox free area, as I call it, is to walk towards Prawn's glass tank. Now that's pretty easy to do, but it still takes way too long. I wish there was a way that I could skip this fight entirely. Well, once again, thanks to the speedrunning community, there is a way to still get credit for beating Prawn without even fighting him. However, this method is not easy to pull off and isn't advised unless you have experience speedrunning this game. In some of the fights in BFBB, there are trigger zones that the developers left in that would allow them to skip entire boss fights. I'm assuming this was done to test some of the features in the game. Whatever it was used for, they left them in the game and were able to reach them. So, let me show you how to hit Prawn's trigger. In order to be able to perform this trick, you'll need to have gotten both the cruise bubble and cruise control, and you'll need to disable Hans, which is something that can be done by going to Bikini Bottom and standing right here and letting Spongebob die. Once he dies, Hans will grab Spongebob into a trigger for Jellyfish Fields. Once you hit that trigger, you click yes to activate the trigger. Now that the trigger is activated, you'll need to stand in the same spot and die again. Once you do, Hans will drag you across the screen into an already activated trigger, which will take you into Jellyfish Fields, ultimately disabling Hans. Doing this will allow you to go out of bounds without dying, which is essential for this trick to work. So once you have both power-ups and have disabled Hans, come here and do a cruise boost, which is an advanced trick that allows SpongeBob to move at twice his normal speed. If you want to learn how to do this trick, then I'll link a tutorial in the description below. Once you have a fast cruise boost, then go here. Once you're here, you'll need to mash the L button. This is called L clipping, and it essentially allows SpongeBob to clip through certain walls that he wouldn't be allowed to clip through normally. Once you clip through the wall, you will need to immediately jump so you don't infinitely fall. If you do infinitely fall, then all you need to do is reload the level. Then you'll need to do helmet bashes to help SpongeBob climb the invisible walls. Once you're at the top of the arena, you'll need to come to this cliff right here, which is right below the exit area. And the last thing you'll need to do, which is definitely the hardest part of the trick for me personally, is to hit the trigger. What I do to hit the trigger is to do 2 full jumps by pressing and holding the jump button for a second, 2 times in a row. If you miss the trigger, then you'll need to reclimb the walls and set it up again. This is why this trick is so hard to perform. The trigger is invisible, and this trick can be very inconsistent if you don't know where the trigger is. So that's why I'd recommend using the second method to beat Prawn if you're new to the speedrunning community, but if you're able to perform the real Prawn skip, then that's definitely the fastest method to beat Prawn.
No, not again. This is not fair. I got a frozen wedgie for this. Is this the end of Prawn?
Final thoughts. In this section of the video, I'll be talking about how the gameplay, design, difficulty, fun factor, and creativity weigh in on my opinion of whether I think a boss is good or not. Anyway, now that I've gotten that out of the way, let's start this section. The fight with Prawn is probably one of my favorites in BFBB because the intended gameplay is fast-paced and interesting. The difficulty curve is gradual and his design is pretty cool. However, the gameplay is pretty bland. Now, I did just say that it was interesting, but interesting gameplay doesn't necessarily mean fun gameplay. Most of the fight is running away from pretty simplistic attacks, and trying to hit Prawn is a huge pain in the ass. And trying to hit Prawn can be a huge pain in the ass, because you have to deal with the barrage of hammer robots as you try to line up your shot. And you only have a limited amount of time to hit Prawn before the phase resets. Speaking of its phases, Prawn really only has one unique phase in the entire fight. The other phases are just extra enemies thrown in. Everything else about Prawn is pretty cool. As I mentioned earlier, Prawn is the only boss besides a Flying Dutchman and King Jellyfish that isn't a robot, which already makes Prawn stand out compared to all the other bosses. However, despite how unique Prawn is, its bad and kind of jerky gameplay can make the fight with him feel more like a grind than something enjoyable. So with all this in mind, my final score for Prawn is a 6 out of 10. So, what do you think about this boss? Do you think this boss deserves a higher or lower ranking? Let me know in the comments below if you enjoyed this video or not. Also, make sure to click the like button if you liked the video and hit that subscribe button. Thank you guys so much for watching. My name is Ryan Kelly and I'll see you in the next episode of Know Your Bosses.